Hey friends, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. This evening I am in my high tunnel and I am going to be doing my first spring garden tour. Now I am going to section these off because we do have so many growing spaces. And so unless you guys wanted to sit here and watch an hour video, an hour and a half long video of me showing you all my plants, I thought, you know what, we'll have a designated day that we do a high tunnel tour, and then we'll have a designated day that we do a raised bed garden tour, and then depending on how much indoor growing space we end up getting in throughout the summer, we might even add that in. But those of you who are new here, welcome. This is something I do every summer it really starts in the spring, goes into the summer, through the fall and the winter. I just enjoy showing you guys. I know so many of us are in different growing zones. We have different climates. We also just have different things we enjoy eating. So I personally love watching garden tours because I like seeing the different varieties people are growing, what the fruit looks like in maturity, and also figuring out how they use that stuff. So I'm hoping this is also, informative to you guys. Granted, a lot of the fruit we have in here isn't ripened yet, so you guys will have to stay tuned to see what it actually looks like and how I plan on using it. But just to give you an overview of variety, that's what today is. A couple specs before we get started. Our high tunnel is a 20 by 50. It came from Grower Solutions. It was on our farm when we bought it and is a huge asset. Now I do have another seed starting tunnel over here that is 14 by 36, and that was built locally by Mindful Farmer. So without further ado, we're gonna kind of start in the middle and then work our way over. So I'm gonna take you guys off the tripod, kind of show you guys what we have going on. Most of our vegetables are on a trellis system. Our tomatoes we've hard pruned to 2 liters, and then our peppers we're gonna be pruning to a single liter, which we already did that. We didn't really have to do any pruning, but they're already starting to produce really well. So I'm pretty excited to get this tour started, but I hope you guys enjoy. So back behind me, we have got the Carmen sweet pepper. I'm pretty sure it has a fancier name than that. These are very similar to a bell pepper, except they get really, really long. And so we've got a few different plans on how we plan on using those, which I'll share with you guys more. So we do have quite a few plants behind us. We are trellising this with jute twine and compostable clips. And honestly, these peppers do really well in this type of trellising system. So they will actually continue to grow up. And Lord, these peppers will be 5 or 6 feet tall, by the time they're said and done, which is really cool. That's not something you see traditionally a lot, are these huge tall pepper plants, but they really thrive like that. A lot of the varieties that you'll hear me mention as we're walking throughout the high tunnel are these hybrid greenhouse varieties. Now I did have someone ask me, what do you mean by greenhouse varieties? What does that mean exactly? And I thought that was a great question. So you'll have to find places that sell them. Not everyone. Some places just specialize in heirlooms. You won't find any F1 hybrids. Hybrid certainly doesn't mean anything bad. It was just crossed for a particular purpose. And so a greenhouse variety is something that is meant to withstand the high humidity, that's used to not being pollinated, and very disease resistant. And so obviously I wouldn't probably grow a lot of these hybrids out in our raised beds because the conditions out in the raised beds are totally different than the elements and the conditions in the high tunnel. But a lot of times I will hear people say, I didn't really have much success with that. Or growing that in the high tunnel, and it really is one, growing within the season, growing things that are going to thrive, whether that's in, if you're growing in the summertime or the wintertime. You can push your limits quite a bit with the high tunnel, but also in the dead of winter, grow things that prefer to be grown in the dead of winter, and vice versa for the summer. But growing those greenhouse varieties that can withstand that higher humidity, that don't need a lot of pollination, and that are very disease resistant, they're going to yield you the best. And so that's really what we've done in here, is maxed out on these hybrid varieties, and I do think that it's going to serve us well, especially when I take you down here and show you the tomatoes in a second. They have not been in very long at all, and these guys are already thriving. But What we do in between new varieties, and you'll probably notice this as I begin to pan and show you, is we create a space. And that's how we know, like especially in the next bed, we've got 3 different pepper varieties. That's how we keep the peppers separate. We do have it listed on a crop plan and things like that. But it is helpful just to give a little bit of space from one variety to another, especially if you are growing something that is like a trellising variety and might climb and try to take hold of the thing next to it. We have found that is pretty helpful. Next, we have these 4 eggplants. So we have just got, I'm assuming, this type of eggplant. These are not actually ours. We are co-farming with some friends, and so these are their eggplants. So I'm not super familiar with these. These aren't actually eggplants that we're growing. These are some friends of ours. But I'm assuming they're just probably like traditional eggplants. And then down here, we have got all of our cucumbers. So we just put these guys in not that long ago. You can see we've already ran the jute twine for the trellising. So we'll be using compostable clips for this too. And the cucumbers will just climb and climb and climb. So very similar to vertical gardening, just a cheaper option. So these are the Katrina varieties. They came from Johnnyseeds. One thing I really like about this variety is that it can be super versatile. So one, we juice a boatload in the summertime. It's just super refreshing, super easy. So these can grow really long and slender, much like an English cucumber, and you can juice them. You can have them for fresh eating, or they do really well if you harvest them. If you've been to the grocery store, you've seen those cute little cucumbers that are just nice to dip in some hummus and munch on. That's particularly what we are growing these for, and we have ourselves set up on a rotation to where I'm starting cucumbers about every 2 to 3 weeks, and as soon as these are done, we'll have more transplants come in. We're also going to be rotating cucumbers in another bed, so that we are going to be having cucumbers now until the fall. So we can kind of harvest these at different stages based off of our needs. So we'll have some that say the small one. I will have some that we probably put up in can because we're almost out of pickles, and then just fresh eating and juicing and things like that. So when you're kind of planning out your garden, that is a large piece of advice I like to give, is think through. Like, you don't want to plant everything at once. I'm a huge advocate for succession planting because you want it to sustain you over the length of time. And so if I just did this one thing of cucumbers and then I yielded them all at once and then I ripped it out and then I was like, oh man, I want cucumbers again, and I either direct seed and have to wait for them to come up, or I start them in a greenhouse and transplant them out, you're really just kind of wasting a lot of valuable time. So by having those things ahead of time, when one comes out, another goes in, and you just keep this nice little succession going. We do this with, you know, flowers a lot, and it really works beautifully. So I have grown these once before in the past, but I do certainly think they're going to thrive in the high tunnel. Now over here we have our tomatoes. We just put in these tomatoes, y'all, a couple weeks ago. Some things I will point out is that we have 2 strings per plant. We have found real quickly that some of these did not appreciate what we did to them, but some of these did just fine. So before we jump into like talking about variety, I did want to tell you why we have them on a 2-liter system, and kind of what that looked like. So earlier in the season when we were seed starting, I decapitated my tomatoes. Craziest thing I've literally ever done. So this is personally the first time I have done this approach with tomatoes. I'm gonna find that video and link it for you guys. But it had me a little nervous, like, oh my gosh. And so essentially what I did is I took my, you know, perfect little tomato plant and I snipped the top off. And by doing that, it essentially sent off these side shoots. And the side shoots would then become the main leaders of the plant. Now this works great with things that you're growing in the high tunnel. You want to keep it on a 2-liter system, which, you know, just enables you to do pruning better. You honestly get a lot more fruit from that. It yields a lot more. And so we did find there was one variety in particular that we had never, my friend had never done before, and it proved that it did not prefer the pruning like this. So those are things we're just jotting down. It is important though to take risks, right? They say no risk, no reward. It's certainly true. And had we not known that, we would have never known. Thankfully, it was only 4 plants, and as you guys can see, the jungle behind me, this is working really well. We also will have our tomatoes on succession. So we do have the hybrids in here. We have heirlooms outside, and then we will do another fall round of paste tomatoes and things to make sauces. But everything that I'm going to tell you about in here are going to be cherry tomatoes or a slicer, and they are all hybrids. So you guys can see here, fruit is already starting to set. We have got quite a few tomatoes, which feels so good. So this is a variety called Rebelski, and I'm sure I'm probably saying that wrong, but so many blooms coming on here. This is a red slicer, and this is what we have for the good first half over here. Super impressed with all of the fruit that's already coming on. I mean, these plants have gotten so big in just the short amount of time that they've been in here. So very, very pleased with that. We do also, I hear a bee buzzing around. So these are, we leave the sides up. These are getting pollinated. So this is still all the Rebelski here. We go all the way down here. Still a ton more fruit. Look at these little guys. This has me so excited. Y'all have no idea. And then here you can tell just by how it is hanging that this is a cherry tomato. So you guys can see here, we got a lot of fruit coming on, which is really, really encouraging. We're gonna have so much fruit. And so these are the Sakura, which is a red cherry. You can harvest them when they're like oranges, but I'm pretty sure they turn to a red. And just so many of these guys are coming on, which is super, super cool. We will go through and clean this up some and kind of clean all the bottom foliage. We are taking out any of the suckers as we see them, which is just pinching in the armpit of the plant. We'll go through and compost that stuff out. But very, very pleased at how quickly these are putting on fruit, and honestly just how much fruit they are producing. So that's been really, really encouraging. So this half here is also the same Sakura. As you guys can see, it is still doing really well with what it's producing. But then you see here, my tomatoes go from being really tall and trellis to super short. And you're like, what's going on here? They also have some leaf curl going on, which all of my other tomatoes do not. And we're wonky here. Like, so many funky things are going on. We have blooms, but no actual fruit yet. And so we've learned real quick that this variety did not appreciate that at all. So that variety was called a Marigold. It was a yellow color, and we only planted, I think, 3 or 4, so we didn't have a bunch of them. We decided not to pull them up. I do want to still leave them in and see if they'll produce. Obviously, I think they're going to produce quite a bit less than we had expected because they just didn't prefer that we topped. So overall, I mean, the tomatoes look great. We do need to go through, cut off some of that bottom foliage just to allow better airflow because it does get so humid and hot in here. But we're clipping about once a week. Every Friday I come in and clip. And usually when I'm clipping, or even if I'm in here throughout the week, is when I'm just kind of looking over the plant, pruning the suckers, things like that. But these will be primarily used for fresh eating. And I am going to make some diced tomatoes out of this. We just ran out of our diced tomatoes. So that is something that I've been jotting down that we really need to make. And I have no doubt that these are going to crank out a bunch of yield. So over here we have a few different pepper varieties, and as you can see we have these spaced out by variety, and we also don't have any sort of string, so these we will be trellising differently and ensuring that they get bushy. So it is just kind of a different way of trellising. These are all my shishito peppers, which we prefer just to blister these in some butter in the cast iron, and they are a great snack. I see I do have some pest damage on that, so we might have to address that. Over here we have got the red ember. So this is going to be a hot pepper used for like chilies and different hot sauces. Gosh, they're covered in ants, so I'm going to have to maybe put some cinnamon out. Here we have the sprinter pepper, which I believe is also a hot pepper. I've never grown this one myself. And here we have an escamillo pepper. So my friend started these and put these all in here. So these are varieties that I, aside from the shishito pepper, I'm not super familiar with, but we agreed to put them in here, kind of fill out space, take some tips on some different trellising techniques. We put these in last week, and you guys can see that they are thriving. So one thing we plan on doing, particularly with the peppers and the tomatoes, is we're going to be doing what we call interplanting. Now the nice thing about interplanting is that you can do this either if you're working in a raised bed or a high tunnel. And essentially what it is where you plant in between something. So we left enough space in between our peppers to go in and sow things like radishes. We could do carrots. We talked about doing 2 lines of radishes in between our tomatoes. You could also plant basil. That's a great companion. And you'll see a lot of people who do high tunnel production, they'll have their line of tomatoes and then they'll have lettuce on either side, because as the tomatoes grow, they provide some shade for the lettuce, and you can grow lettuce a lot longer. So we are going to be trying some of that. We're also always going to be starting things like spinach and lettuce, and we will actually be starting all of our root vegetables aside from radishes, but our beets and things like that. We'll have these in these little mini blocks so that anytime maybe there's a space to fill in, or maybe something died, we can replace that and just constantly have food that's coming in and coming out is really our goal and our vision with this. So this year we've got this whole bed full of peppers, but we will be interplanting with those root crops. And then we have this whole bed behind us that doesn't have anything in here yet. We're still working on that. This is where we'll start another round of cucumbers so that we've got that succession, and we'll continuously be seeding and transplanting out those. And then we're also going to talk through some more root crops, because we ferment a lot of food. And even though we are interplanting in some of our other beds, it would be nice to just have a designated space to more carrots, more beets, more radishes, things that we're eating on the daily and going through a lot. And especially in the summertime, you can't really beat a fermented snack. It tastes super, super good. So we still have a lot of spaces, especially when we start our raised bed garden tour. You'll notice there's a lot of spaces not filled in yet, because I don't want to put something in there just to put it in there if I don't have a clear plan of what I'm going to use it for, what I'm going to do. And so we're kind of just, this is a lot of space. We have probably tripled the amount of growing space from our old farm, and we just want to make sure that we're maxing it out efficiently and not just putting something in there for the sake of filling a bed, and really thinking through that. So I am open to suggestions if you guys have anything that you might think, you know, taste well, or maybe a new variety to try. I don't allow myself a lot of those on the farm, but I am always open to one here and one there. So that's all of the food production that's going on right now. Now I'm going to shift and show you the outside beds, which is our flower production. We grew all these flowers over winter, and thankfully they survived. All my overwintered flowers in the raised beds did not, which was super sad. But we had some crazy storms happen and some wonky weather, so it wasn't really surprising. So we started all of these last summer. They were in here all winter. They did really, really great. And then the spring happens and they really just shot up and went crazy. That is the benefit of overwintering. I have been asked, well, why would you overwinter your flowers and not just start them in the spring? And the real benefit of that is we have our snapdragons behind me. I've been harvesting snapdragons every Tuesday and Friday for months now and been selling them wholesale. As to where most of the flower farmers around here have only been harvesting snapdragons for the last couple weeks. So while we're on our 5th or 6th cutting, they're just now on their 1st. And so it really just allows you to get a head start to the season, which is really kind of crucial if you are wanting to sell your flowers. So if we didn't intend to sell, I don't know that I would overwinter them. I mean, yes, you get blooms earlier, but it is quite a bit of work and things to think through. But if you're selling it, definitely consider it. So now I'm going to show you all of the wonderful varieties. Some of them I'm not sure I'll know off the top of my head, so I'll put them in there. I'll go, review my Johnnyseeds Johnny's order. But everything we've grown in the high tunnel has come from Johnnyseeds. It is where I grow and buy most of my flowers from. And especially if I'm looking for hybrid varieties, that's usually the place that I'm going. So I'll leave all that down in the link below. Alrighty, here we have our beloved snapdragons. You guys can see they are stunning. This one is a bit of a two-toned and really kind of a late bloomer. We have not seen very many of these, nor have we harvested them, but they've been coming on and super, super pretty. This white one back here, we didn't get a lot. That's what we had all here. It did not survive the winter. This was the Potomac Apple Blossom. So didn't get a bunch of these. Then we've got this beautiful yellow, and you guys can see it's pretty slim pickings, and that's because we have been harvesting off of these for months and months. This is the Potomac Apricot. Super, super stunning. It is ideal when you're going to harvest, if you're harvesting to sell them, to wait until a few blooms around the bottom have bloomed out, but then the top like this is pretty bare. That way you're just ensuring a good, nice vase life. So we have these kind of broke up into sections. Some of these are a little over bloomed, and that's okay. We are only harvesting 2 days a week, so we're trying to hit the peaks. And then the rest of this is this deep pinkish purple, really, really stunning. Goes well with a lot of other flowers, especially if you're working with like whites and creams, which is typically what we gravitate to. And so this variety is called the Potomac Royal. You guys can see why. I mean, it's stunning. So we do bundle all of ours in 15, which that's kind of just like after we've talked to consumers, but it's worked well for us. But we do have quite a few, even though we've been harvesting for a while. They'll probably be done shortly. And then we will follow this bed up with ginger, which is real exciting. We had a nice harvest of ginger last year and hoping for another one. This was also a space where we had overwintered flowers that just didn't do that well. So this is Campanula, which has not popped up yet. And then this was a flower called Orlea, which is a really nice just kind of filler. It spreads like that. Super pretty. But we haven't, you know, we didn't have enough success in this to be selling it. So I've just been coming out here picking some of these to go, you know, in arrangements in the house. But they are really pretty. I don't know that I would grow them again, but they have been nice. And then, like I said, we've got the Campanula, which hasn't done anything yet. Now, the next few flowers, I am so excited to tell you, these are all new varieties to me, which is really cool. So last year I grew a boatload of zinnias and sunflowers, and I sold some of them, but this year I really branched out with doing overwintered flowers, trying to find other varieties that would really kind of fill out an arrangement. So we're not actually making arrangements here and selling on our farm. We are just selling these by the bunches to a wholesaler, and then her team on her farm makes them and sells the arrangements. It works great because we live in the boonies. So selling bouquets probably wouldn't work that great for us. So we're able to just partner with that business, and it just feels really good. So behind me is a flower that I am super excited to show you guys. I am going to pick one here. This is called Nigella. So we got these from Johnnyseeds as well. They're like this super, super cool, I call it like this spider flower. I mean, it works as a filler, but then it has this greenery, which is really nice too. And then this cool pop. Now, one of the cool things that we're experimenting with is the only thing about the Nigella that's not the most enjoyable thing is they're very, very tedious to harvest. We do have this horticulture netting up here, which helps ensure straighter stems. But there's a lot here, and so this is probably one of the most time-consuming flowers to harvest. And so the cool thing about this is kind of like a poppy. A lot of people don't grow poppies for the actual flowers, they grow them for the pods because they can put those in arrangements and a lot of other things. Well, Nigella also produces a pretty cool pod after it is bloomed. So this is what it looks like bloomed, and then after it's bloomed, it turns into this funky little pod which can also be used. I don't think this one's, when it's fully closed up, it turns purple. And so we are experimenting with some of these. Going to take them to the local flower store that we're selling to, see what she thinks about that, if she can use those in arrangements. And if she can, we'll probably let the rest of these go to pod. That way it's just a little bit easier to harvest and deal with. But the Nigella has certainly been beautiful. It's produced a lot, and it's just probably one of the funkiest flowers I've seen. And so for me, it adds texture. It's just, oh gosh, it's so fun. So yeah, I've certainly enjoyed it. All right, next up behind me, these huge, massive plants. These are Dara, also known as Queen's Anne's Lace. They're really pretty because they put this spread on, like you guys can see here. And some of these come in some really cool colors. So check out this purple here. So really, really fun. These are really just starting to put out where we can harvest enough. They're growing super, super tall, as you guys can see. So that, you know, is nice for like harvesting. When we're harvesting, we're trying to aim for like 12 to 18 inch stem length. And so this makes it really nice instead of constantly leaning over and trying to clip in between trellises. This really has started to bloom kind of at my height, which makes harvesting super easy. But I have enjoyed these too. They're just like this really, really beautiful color. You can get lots of different colors, which is nice too. So that's been a fun one. And down here we gravitate to a flower called pincushion. The technical botanical name is scabiosa, I believe, and it's just this fun little pincushion. Some of these have finally started to bloom, so I'm going to take you guys off the tripod and show you. All right, here we have it. Now, like I said, I do believe this is called scabiosa. I'll make sure, and if it's not, I'll put in the right technical name. I know it as its common name, which is pincushion. So fun. I mean, really fun. So here's what it looks like when it's just started. So what they look like when they have actually flowered is this beautiful white flower, which as you can see is a lot of fun. I've got some at some different stages here. So this one is like starting to flower back here. You guys can see that. So that's really fun. So we haven't actually harvested a bunch of these to sell because they haven't bloomed out yet. But we're starting to see more new blooms. So these will be ones that we add in. They're fun. They haven't produced just a ton, but I like them well enough. And then behind me, I have the flower that everyone told me not to grow. When we were building out, you know, really the flowers we wanted to grow this year, we were looking at common flowers. We were looking at flowers that people would go to their grocery store to buy and really encourage them to source out their local florist or their local farmer's market or farm stand. And carnations is one of those that you walk into a grocery store and you see carnations, but they have this really bad rap of being an old person's flower, of not smelling good, of looking like a fake plastic flower. And so I had some like, oh, do we do this? Do we not do this? And I'm so glad we did. So we got a carnation mix. So I do not know the specific varieties of all of these because we bought a mix, and I'm really glad we did, because we are able to take photos of these and we could do our research and figure out the varieties that we liked. Some do have that artificial, like, oh, I don't love that. But then we have some of these that are just like these beautiful, like streaked, stunning. We've got different oranges, we've got pinks, we've got solids. I'm going to take you guys and show you, but these were probably, they took the longest. And especially for stem length, that's something that we're starting to get some that are taller, but we have struggled with these getting the stem length we need to sell. They are a spreader flower, so you guys can see they spread like this, and then they have multiple little, you know, buds on here. They're in the same family with dianthus, which I have some of that planted in my green stock. So they are similar, but a little bit different as far as how they bloom and stuff like that. But Aside from the stem length not being ideal, and I don't know if that's because we're still early in the season, like we've got a ton of buds, so these will probably continue to get bigger, which is pretty normal. When you get flowers, you know, they're kind of puny, they're kind of hit and miss, and then when they start going, they really just start to shoot up, and next thing you know, you've got flowers taller than you are in your tunnel. The one thing I will note about the carnation, if you're thinking about growing it, these are very, very fragrant flowers. So I keep smelling this because the smell is like, whoa. I mean, I can walk in the tunnel, and much like if you're greeted with honeysuckle, that's kind of how I feel about the carnation. They put off just this vibrant floral smell, and I've just been really, really pleased with them. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't grow them again just because of their stem length, because if your goal is to make these little mason jar bouquets or recycled jar bouquets, these would be perfect. But if your goal is to make a larger bouquet, then I'd have to probably do some troubleshooting and see how much longer the stems got at the end of the season. But I'm going to show you guys the ones that we have because they are stunning. As you guys can tell, there is no shortness of beauty in the tunnel. I really have liked having the flowers on the side, the vegetables in the middle, which is what I'm hoping to continue throughout the summer and find different things to grow and always just kind of have this, I really spent a lot of years thinking you either had to have a vegetable garden or a flower garden, and over the last few years I really started changing the way I thought about that, and I started looking at it as this beautiful marrying of two things, that the flowers attract the pollinators, which is why we are seeing a lot of pollinators coming into our tunnel. They are coming for the flowers, but they're also pollinating things like our peppers and our cucumbers and our tomatoes, and that's really, really crucial and vital that we create that habitat to invite those pollinators in. And so I've really just tried to rack my brain on how we can include and incorporate more flowers on our farm while also having it be something that's great for the environment, but running a profit for us. And so the flowers have been a great just extension to our farm, something we are going to continue to expand and just build upon. So super, super thrilled to be doing that and sharing that journey with you all. But thank you so much for hanging out with me for our first garden tour of the season. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon.